Hi, everyone. Welcome to Healing Harm. My name is Blair Embry. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Prison Yoga Project, and we are so excited to have Susan Shannon here with us today. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Susan. Insert round of applause. Yes. Susan Shannon has her master's in divinity. She is a seeker, teacher, earth and animal steward, and a devotee of the heart. She has worked in the fields of emotional literacy and restorative justice for over 20 years, incorporating over 45 years of Buddhist practice and study from the Tibetan tradition, having been blessed to have studied under many of Tibet's greatest scholars of these times. She's worked with various diverse populations all her life, including inmates, Tibetan refugees, homeless, differently abled, at-risk youth, and most recently, she is the Buddhist chaplain to the men in San Quentin State Prison and death row. She currently teaches about spiritual care and chaplaincy through the Pacific Institute, as well as classes on Tibetan Buddhism through the Sukhasiddhi Foundation, the Chaplaincy Institute of Interfaith Studies, and various other Dharma Centers. Susan is the founder of the Buddhist Prison Ministry, providing correspondence classes to prison populations across the US. She resides in the San Juan Islands, where she writes, provides spiritual coaching, and cares for the sacred grounds she shares with many sentient beings. Thank you so much for being here this morning, Susan.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor.
And how we like to start our time together is by setting kind of a collective tone. Will you lead us in a centering opportunity?
Sure, I would be happy to. I was feeling into what would be a nice grounding for you all. And given that prisons are a part of everybody's life here, I think I would like to lead you in a grounding exercise that includes a visualization that I found very useful in my prison work and find very useful today. I'm going to turn off my email. Sorry, I forgot to do that. So let's feel our feet on the ground. If you're sitting on a floor, on a chair rather, and whatever way you're sitting and wherever you're sitting, just pay attention to the areas of your body that are on our dear Mother Earth. Feel yourself settling in to what it is to be in the presence of your own heart right now. Whatever time zone you're in, however busy your morning has been, just allow that energy to settle. Feel that settling, linking you with the groundedness, the equanimity of our Mother Earth. Imagine with every inhale, her energy, groundedness, holding us always, rising up into your body. Imagine it as a color, an energy. Imagine her generosity filling you with a sense of peace, a sense of home. Imagine a triangle, the widest part being on our Mother Earth, the point of the triangle coming up into your heart space. And as you breathe, allow that visualization of energy, of groundedness, filling that triangle, filling your core, all the way up into your heart space. And from this place, we will entrain our breathing, creating a web, creating a weaving of Sangha, of intention, as we are scattered across the earth today. So let's breathe together, starting with an inhale, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4. And inhale, and exhale, deep lower belly, bringing the air in and pushing the air out. And continue to breathe at that pace if you can, if that's comfortable for you, modifying however is necessary. Imagine as we all breathe with our awareness in our heart space, we're finding each other. We are energetically weaving together our intentions, our hopes for serving those in our lives, in our work, our families, our friends, the inmates we serve in prisons. We are uniting and we are magnifying that intention as we breathe in the energies of the earth. Now bring your awareness up from your heart space into your upper body, your chest, opening your chest. Your awareness up your neck, your jaw, your face, your forehead, all the way up to the top of your head. And imagine another triangle with the wide base opening towards the heavens. And the point, once again, intersecting in your heart space. This time intersecting with the point of the energy of Mother Earth. And imagine all your teachers, the wisdom beings who have guided you, who have protected you, who have given you courage. Imagine their blessings, their gratitude pouring into you for taking this time out of your life to focus on cultivating skills and tools for serving others. And imagine that energy coming down, funneling down into that triangle with a color, with a visual. And in this way, we are spiritually aligned between heaven and earth. Whatever your version of heaven is, all the enlightened energies guide us with the path laid out for us by Mother Earth. So from this intersection of the points, the triangle, creating a diamond in our heart space. Just imagine that diamond is shining, is reflecting, is fractaling from all others in this group today. And hold this image of the intersecting triangles as a tool you can bring forward when you need to. Especially for today, just feel for a moment what it feels like to be in spiritual alignment, to be held by heaven and earth. Remember that feeling. Feel into it and know that it is not your feeling, it is your right to feel this. And that as you feel this, so too will others around you feel this. And from this diamond in your heart, imagine a path leading out. What is that path? Is it brick? Is it stone? Is it dirt? Whatever it is, imagine it leading out from this place, support, of blessing, of protection, of guidance. And from this place on the path, as you step out onto the path, we too step in to the beginning of this session. So let's take an inhale, exhale, another inhale, another exhale, and when you're ready, you can bring your awareness back to this event, and we will begin.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
That was a gift. While you were leading us, I felt so much joy and so much belonging. I think another reason why I love the Dharma so much, Sangha, the three jewels. Will you begin by telling us how you found the Dharma in this life?
Sure. The Dharma found me. In fact, the name of a story that I wrote. When I was young, very young, so between birth and 4, my parents had a Japanese dentist that we went to, and I suppose it was maybe a little bit beyond 4 that I started going to the dentist. I don't know, but at the same time, between him and a man who lived up in the corner of our cul-de-sac, who had spent 30 years in China and Japan, I was introduced early to images of Buddhism. And they were foreign to me because they weren't in my house. And as you know, when we're small, our world is very myopic. But the more I spent with especially Mr. Cunningham up in the corner of the cul-de-sac, the more I began to resonate, vibrate with these images that I saw. And one day, Mr. Cunningham told me he was going to carve a Buddha. That might have been the first time I heard the word Buddha, I don't know. He was going to carve it out of a 3-foot square cube that was 6 by 6s, all glued and clamped. And I watched the whole thing, and he told me, he said, you sit there, don't say anything, because the Buddha didn't say anything. And you're going to model for me while I carve this Buddha. And I think it was actually a way for him to still have me around, but shut me up. So I sat there for months watching him carve this Buddha, and fast forward to 8th grade. And I was actually kind of, when he was done, I was insulted that why would I be a model for this fat little guy sitting here? So fast forward to 8th grade, when one of my teachers, who was a great guide for me, he said in the margins of one of my papers, your writing rings the bell of the Dharma. And when I read that word Dharma, something exploded in me. And I had to pursue what that meant. So pretty much my spiritual path started from around that time, 13, 14, However, I also met my first Tibetan friend when I was 4 years old. And I've been immersed in the Tibetan community ever since. So it feels like the Dharma found me.
Absolutely. I hear that too, strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So around 13, 14, what did the rest of your path look like? How did it unfold?
Mm-hmm. I was attracted to Chinese Buddhism. And I studied Chinese on my own until I got my own teacher. And at the same time, I was also attracted to Eastern teachings, the Bhagavad Gita, especially some of the Advaita Vedanta teachers. I was always led to different books and goodwills and things like that. And luckily my mom, who my parents were Roman Catholic, luckily she allowed me this and saw that I was a seeker and had some understanding of what a seeker was. But things really changed for me when I found the Heart Sutra. And when I found the Heart Sutra, I became very focused on Buddhism, and I became pretty obsessed with the Heart Sutra. So I studied the Heart Sutra in translated from different languages. That took me probably another 5 years or so pursuing Chinese Buddhism, going to Taiwan, studying Chinese, and then eventually finding a commentary on the Heart Sutra that was from the Tibetan. And it was so rich, it was so deep, it was so different than other translations of commentaries that I had immersed myself into, that I began to focus more on Tibetan Buddhism. And eventually, through a whole nother story, which I don't know how I could sum it up, I found my way to Madison, Wisconsin. I read in 1979, that the Dalai Lama was coming to the United States for the first time. And when I read that, I started to weep, and cathartically weep, and thought, well, I've got to find out why I'm having this response. And that led me to, at first, Seattle, when His Holiness came to Seattle in 1979. And then later, 1980, the Kala Chakra in Madison, Wisconsin. So ever since then, my focus has been on Tibetan Buddhism.
Did you take refuge then when he visited?
I took refuge with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1980. And I've since taken refuge in every lineage, because a lot of times when lamas do a retreat or do a teaching, they will first give a refuge ceremony. So I've taken refuge with all the lineages at this point. But I consider His Holiness the Dalai Lama to be my root guru.
Mm-hmm. What was that like, being there for the first time when he came?
Oh my gosh. Well, when he came to Seattle in 1979, there was just a handful of people there. People didn't really know the Dalai Lama. So there were Tibetans from Vancouver who came down. So they were all in their Tibetan finery. And there were a few people from, Westerners from local areas that came down and came over. And we were all outside on the corner of this location in Seattle. And as the event began, His Holiness began to chant, which I found out later was the Heart Sutra in Tibetan. And I just fell to the ground. I just sunk to the ground and sat there on the curb, pretty much out of my body, for about 5 hours. And so I was discovered by a friend after the crowds had dispersed, and he kind of brought me to, and that was incredible. That's not when I took refuge from him, though. I took refuge from him in the next year when he came to do the Kala Chakra. And every time I've seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is probably 35 times at this point, I've had similar experiences. I've been able to kind of moderate the out-of-body experience a little bit more most of the time. But yes, it's quite, there's an awakening that happens. In fact, I was just reading this the other night in a text of, I was reading a textbook description of when one reawakens to something. And it usually involves being verklempt, having tears, having chills, having rushes, being kind of depixelated. And that's the experience that I often have had.
Mm. And you led us a little bit in that, and this understanding of that the mind is so powerful and that our presence does impact others, right? And so his presence, and he has cultivated that presence, right?
Yeah.
So that it is able to ripple through all of the minds of everyone near.
Absolutely. And this is important to think of especially for people who are in any kind of helping tradition and focusing today on prisons, because there's really anything we do after cultivating that presence and intention is a topping. If we don't have that, and what I mean, like a topping on frozen yogurt or something, if we don't have that intention to serve, if we don't have that intention to really be open with good boundaries, the intention of being present to someone's reality in a non-judgmental way, with that awakened heart, especially talking from the Tibetan tradition, the bodhicitta, the awakened heart. If we have that, then anything we do or say is secondary, because it will ripen. And, good examples are, if you've ever been in the presence of somebody and you just burst into tears, or you have those tears well up, or you see from the kind of the bhakti movement now, there are certain kirtanwalas like Krishnadas or Jayutal who have a lineage. They have a great deal of devotion that goes back into a lineage. It's very solidly grounded, and people will weep hearing these sounds or singing these sounds, and that's the opening. And I saw that so much in my prison work, of just being present in a group, and people would ripen into whatever needed to heal at that time, even most of the time unexpectedly. So yes, this is a really important tool of prison work, is to check yourself with your intention before you go in.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of, how did you find chaplaincy? What made you say yes?
Well, I've been asked by people all my life for spiritual support. And after a long dark night of the soul, I ended up with an education stipend that I needed to use. And I thought that I was going to go back to school and get a degree in psychology, but I wasn't really sure. I didn't really want to go back and study all kinds of things that I wasn't interested in. And all I was ever really interested in was Dharma. So I also thought maybe I would go into some kind of ministry or chaplaincy. And one day I was thinking I needed to really focus on requesting from the universe some guidance. So I arranged my puja area in a way that was specific to requesting guidance. And I did a lot of preliminary getting ready to request. And just as I was putting my butt on the zafu, I got a phone call. And I always think that if somebody's calling me when I'm in meditation, it's part of the meditation. So I don't see it as a distracted. I will answer. And I answered. And it was a friend who said, "Susan, my husband's dying. He's in the hospital. Can you come?" And it was out of the blue. She wasn't somebody I was in touch with regularly or anything like that. So I went to the hospital and experienced his transition, and met the chaplain there. And he encouraged me to contact Gina Rose Halpern, who is the founder of the Chaplaincy Institute, and ask her if I could be enrolled. And I called her when I got home, and it was amazing because I walked into my backyard after being in the hospital, and I had this fruit tree, peach tree, and the peaches were just piled up on the ground. They were so ripe, they were so abundant. And I thought, well, this is an amazing sign. The fruit is falling. And I called Gina Rose and she interviewed me about everything that I'd done with monasteries and nonprofits, and she enrolled me, and that's how I found my way into chaplaincy.
Moves me to tears hearing that, right? That like the call was there. You answered the call. And
Yeah.
you, right, that you were preparing and you were ready to answer the call.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so much of our study and so much potency of life and the Dharma is really acknowledging our death.
Yeah.
Really seeing impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
How did that lead you to working with incarcerated populations?
How did seeing my own impermanence lead me to?
Yeah, I guess I didn't phrase that well. So like from seeing or working, doing chaplaincy, what brought you to working on death row?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll answer that in two parts.
Yeah.
I knew as I was going through seminary that I didn't want to work in a hospital. I don't like hospitals. I'd had a lot of friends die, and I've been in hospitals too much over the last bunch of years. And, you know, your viewers here don't know that my dog ran off right before the show started, and she's just right outside the gate here. So if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I apologize, but there's a lot of potential for danger here. So let me just get up and let the dog out.
It's perfect. A little intermission.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Hey. Okay, thank you for that. That's
of course. I'm glad Jade came back.
Yeah, so am I. We have eagles and owls and all kinds of things.
Oh, and a sweet little one. Yeah.
Little turkey chaser. Gosh, she's soaking wet with sticks all over her.
I was wondering that too. I know that the Pacific Northwest is getting a ton of rain right now too, and I was like, oh, I bet she's soaked.
Oh, she's totally soaked. Yeah, yeah. So I had worked in monasteries for a long time, and an astrologer predicted when I was 13 that my life work would be in prisons, hospitals, or monasteries. And so I'd already done monasteries. And in my last year at the MDiv program, I needed a class on Friday mornings specifically. And the only one was prison ministry. So I took it, and part of that class was to go into San Quentin and attend their restorative justice program. I had been working with youth in restorative justice for a very long time. So it was very comfortable for me to go into a restorative justice program. And I felt, after my first time into the prison, I felt the same way I felt when I met my Lama, not His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but my Lama, when I attended his monastery in Nepal for the first time. There was a spinning. It's kind of like, you know, when you fall in love and you just, it's like being immersed in a different kind of water. Your sleep is taken over, your wake, your narrative is taken over. And so I knew there was work there for me, and I ended up doing field work after the prison ministry course. And then I did 4 units of clinical pastoral education, which is the traditional training for chaplains. I did that there. And as I did that there, luckily for me, the Catholic chaplain who was my mentor had also just started there. And so he was very open to me creating programs. And I started a lot of programs, and partly in order to get my hours for for CPE, but also seeing the needs of the men and seeing what, for example, James Fox, what a pioneer. And James was doing such incredible work with the men. So were many, many other people who I hope I get a chance to mention by the end of this webinar today. But I started a devotional music night, for example, thinking that these men are opening their hearts through this hard work and through the opening of the channels and the meridians and all through the yoga, and yet where do they have to go? Can they go with this expanded sense of love? So I thought that maybe utilizing the body as vessel, utilizing the body as instrument, and singing sacred sounds, singing mantras, singing kirtan, doing call and response, maybe that would be really helpful and a great adjunct for some of these other more heady programs. And so I started a devotional music night and began to bring kirtan in and kirtan wallas, and everybody, I know a bunch of the kirtan guys, and every one of them said yes. So that was wonderful. That program is just starting up again after COVID. And then also in the beginning in the prison ministry class, this leads to the death row, we had a pretty beefy reading list, and I read Jarvis Master's books, and I found through Jarvis's books that he had also taken refuge with a lama that I had, Chagdu Tuku, a Nyingma lama. In fact, I had a relationship that was more personal with Chagdu Tuku. When he very first came to the United States, he came out to our house a lot in Lagunitas, etc. And also Chagdu Tuku had given Jarvis and myself the same practice. Both of us, pretty much. He said, you must do this red Tara practice. So I never thought I'd meet Jarvis, but since then, I always thought, well, this is auspicious. So Chagdu Tuku is in the prison now with Jarvis and I. And I would imagine not just Chagdu Tuku in his, he's out of his body now, but his mind stream of bodhicitta, as well as Tara, above death row. Whenever I walked in, I imagined all of that. Whenever I walked in, even before I met Jarvis. And I said to Father George, Jarvis and I have the same teacher. And he said, oh, really? Oh, that's really interesting. Father George was my mentor. And I wrote down, he said, well, why don't you write some stories or something and I can give it to Jarvis. He doesn't have anybody that can offer him spiritual support at this point. So I wrote down all my Chagdu Tuku stories, and Father George, who was a great procrastinator and forgetter, but a great man in a lot of ways. And I said to him one day, have you given Jarvis my Chagdu Tuku stories? And he goes, oh, no, I haven't, actually. I keep forgetting. But why don't we go over there right now? And I was like, what? I was on the 8th day of a fast. I almost didn't come in the prison that day because I was so porous. And at the same time, I was like, are you kidding me? This is like, yes, of course. So I went into death row. I followed Father George in. I did a lot of energetic protection on the way through the cell block, and it was quite amazing. I felt a little bit like Mr. Magoo, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mr. Magoo, but he's a cartoon that I grew up with, and put on the bulletproof, stab-proof vest and followed Father George down the ground floor of cells until we got to Jarvis's cell. And Jarvis and I hit it off with that feeling of meeting each other again. There was nothing new about meeting Jarvis or about our conversation. We just went deep right away. And Father George suggested that perhaps I would like to come in regularly and support Jarvis in his Tibetan Buddhist practice. So of course, that was amazing. And I began to go in weekly, and it was just Jarvis and I for a couple of years, I believe. And it's this funny little room that David Sheff writes about this in his book, A Buddhist on Death Row. David interviewed me for hours and hours about the specifics, but eventually, and those were incredible times. And Jarvis is an amazing human being. And we knew that given we both had this the same Lama, and given that the great Lamas are not limited to this human realm in terms of their intention, in terms of the bodhicitta is beyond all space and time. And so we knew that at one point we would probably be giving up our one-on-ones so that greater number of men could be served. And that's exactly what happened. Another man who's a devout Buddhist on death row 602'd the prison, which means it's a kind of a preliminary to a lawsuit saying that, well, he wanted to get in on this too. And that began the Buddhist Sangha there on death row that I was able to lead for 9 years. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll invite you to continue though. So I know that you created a framework for study. Will you tell us about this Sangha work?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. And I'll say on a very personal level, since there are some practitioners here, for me, one of my great teachers, his name was Geshe Kinrab, and he really instilled in me the outer inner manifestation of our spiritual practice. And what I mean by that is for me to be able to go into death row as somebody who does practices different tantric practices, I knew this was a pinnacle of my own practice, that I had reached a point in my own practice where I was being invited into one of the most negative places in the universe, in the earth, and that the razor sharpness of my own practice was ready for this, but that it was a challenge to constantly maintain my own razor edge sharpness of intention, of bodhicitta, of energetic protection amongst that atmosphere of such oppression, depression, hopelessness, and violence. So I didn't take this lightly. I took this as part of my spiritual practice, part of my assignment, if you will, when one takes the Bodhisattva vow. So the first group I had on death row, the first group that was more than 2 or 3 people, when I asked the men what brought them to Buddhism, it began to be a bit of a pissing match right off, a competition. Well, Zen, well, Tibetan, well, Theravadan, well, this, well, that. And, I was like, no, this is not where we're going, you guys. We're going to focus on what is common to Buddhism, to all schools of Buddhism. And especially given where you are, we're going to focus on what is most important for your own inner transformation, regardless of how your lifetime ends. We are going to focus on what will more immediately transform your hearts. We're going to focus on cultivating a warm heart. And we're going to focus on really expanding our understanding and our compassion. And that's what we're going to focus on. So I wrote an outline that ended up to be about 21 or 22 pages. And the outline includes all that all the schools of Buddhism have in common. And given how it works on death row, meaning death row is a different animal than the mainline, working with mainline. Death row inmates are classified in terms of what they call yards. And yards are designated by gang activity or crime or protected status or whatever. So it would take, I had, I think, 8 or 9 yards. And so it would take me 8 or 9 weeks to cycle through this outline, teaching the same thing 8 weeks and then moving on to another piece of it. And so it took us 2.5 years, maybe a little longer, to go through the entire outline. And by then I had 64 guys signed up in my Sangha. Not all showed up, but between each week, I would send written information for them that had to do with certain contemplations, certain practices that were specific to their death row life, such as TV puja. For a lot of the men who didn't have a big visiting list or many legal visits, the only time they would get out of their cell was a little bit of time out in exercise and religious services. So TV was something to utilize as a spiritual practice to me. And so I built an entire bulk of prayers and spiritual practices that one could do while watching TV. Well, you know, you see all these people on TV, right? Who you're never going to know, but you watch them going through various stages of suffering. And especially if you watch the news, but not just the news, anything on TV is, you see the human condition. So what an incredible opportunity to practice Tonglen, or to practice equanimity, or to look inward at yourself and see where are you judging. And so things like this. So there began to be, from what the men told me, because I was only going in and out, I heard from the men over time, not a long time passed before I began hearing this, Susan, what we're doing here is affecting others. Something's changing here. Similar to how James and Jacques and Rochelle and Jamie and some of the pioneers of prison work, they wove the warp and weft for the work that people like me who came later began to build on. And so my prison group, my Buddhist Sangha on death row, began to weave a warp and weft that eventually, and still from what I hear from guys who I'm in touch with, is a bit of a lifeboat for people there. We began each session with a meditation. And I had told the guys early on, I said, we're not going to be a practice group, but what I found was they loved to meditate so much. And I would look at them as I led them through a grounding, which was not unlike what we did today. I did several different versions, and their faces would be beautiful. They would be glowing. They would be at peace. I would sometimes cry, wishing that the world could see the humanity of these men in front of me. And so as we practiced together, as we meditated together, more and more and more, and it began to be 100%, the entire cell block would quiet down. And at the time there was 720 guys, 5 tiers high, all of them yelling, hollering about sports or playing chess or checkers or tossing their kites through the cell bars or complaining about food or whatever. Every time we would quiet the cell block down. And so as I saw that, I began to point that out. And I pointed out to guys, look, you guys, we have some power here. We're generating power here. We're creating a portal of energy that we can infuse with whatever we want. So given this is a Buddhist service, let's really focus on spreading our caring for each other, spreading our equanimity. So we would include the guards in our meditations. We would include the victims in our meditation. We would include you know, everybody in the prison and beyond in our meditation. And it was incredibly powerful. And it was back to the tantric practice element of it. It showed me the power of transforming negativity.
Mm.
You know, in Buddhism, another reason why Buddhism is so welcome in prisons is because Buddhism is not a condemning faith tradition. Buddhism, we have saints like Milarepa or Angulimala, who were serial killers. I had serial killers in my Sangha. And when they saw the truth reflected back to them, they opened into their own truth and became liberated. So this idea of karma being able to be transformed to greater or lesser degree was obvious to me after seeing the power of what we did just in those hours on death row. It's incredible. And I have a number of men who are in touch with me now on death row through my Buddhist prison ministry. And they tell me that what we did is still palpable. It's still working there. So I want to emphasize that to you guys as people who do this work. Do not underestimate the power of your presence and your intention.
I know that you, when we had spoke earlier, we had some intentions of wanting to offer some teachings or some offerings for us. I feel like this is a good through for that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that came to mind and has stayed in the forefront of my mind since Blair and I began to talk about this is the need for energetic protection. I think most prison training programs have a piece on boundaries. And energetic protection and boundaries are similar, but energetic protection is something that I saw not practiced by most of the prison volunteers that I rub shoulders with. Energetic protection, I think, or a lack of it, is a cause of a lot of burnout among chaplains, especially, but among people in the helping tradition. By nature, we're empaths. People who are therapists, people who are social workers, maybe even doctors and nurses, prison chaplains, prison volunteers especially. We're empaths. We have some empathetic, sympathetic resonance with the suffering of the world, and we're called to do what we can do to attend to that, to lessen that. And when I say sympathetic, I don't mean sympathy. I mean sympathetic like a sympathetic string on a sitar or something like that. So in terms of prison work specifically, and I don't know where it is, how it is where you all work, but my guess is it's the same. The men and the women show up usually with their best face forward. They're very happy to be able to do this practice with the volunteers. They're very thankful. And yet at the same time, so if that's all we see, we can, as volunteers, step on a path of bypassing reality, or an important reality, an energetic reality. The reality that most of them, all of them, if they're in prison, have experienced a great deal of violence. Prison itself is a violent place. Even if somebody can go through a prison and not have any violence inflicted upon self, they live in an atmosphere where violence has happened, will happen. So on death row, for example, nearly every cell on death row has had a suicide over the years. And that's something that was confirmed to me by people who've been there 30, 40 years. Broken dreams, sadness, the tears at night, all the loss of identity. People who have come from level 4 prisons and seen the incredible, sometimes even choreographed violence, gladiator violence choreographed by guards. This is in the energy of the people who show up to our groups with smiles and with happiness. This is in their energetic field. And that's just being in prison. That's not taking into account the kind of violence and trauma they most likely, most of them have experienced in their lives before incarceration. So to be a prison volunteer, really, in a lot of ways, all you need to do is have the willingness and sign some papers and do a training. But to be an effective prison volunteer, we really need to have energetic protection when we walk in there. And think about, let's just drop the idea of prisons right now and think about our world, especially post-COVID, or we're not even post-COVID. COVID keeps hitting in waves. But if you think about the combination of pandemic, of climate change, losing our earth, there's terms for it now, solastalgia, terra dysphoria, the loss of earth as we know it, even though she still holds us with equanimity. The resources, I don't need to go on into that, but you all know what I'm talking about. If any of you have grandchildren or even contemplating bringing children into the world, there's this idea of what world are we bringing them into? A loss of earth as we know it. And if you think about the earth and all the elements of the earth, we are made of those elements. So grief and loss is a part of our being right now. You can list the outer factors of having to do with COVID and having to do with whatever, fill in the blank with your own personal lives, and you can list the bigger picture. So we're dealing with a lot of energy just walking out the door. And it's important for us as soldiers, and I say soldier with a S-O-U-L, as people called to serve, that we can preserve ourselves. A lot of you probably have taken the Bodhisattva vow, if you're a Buddhist. And the Bodhisattva vow is a vow to be of benefit to all sentient beings for as long as sentient beings remain. And I think in our Western world, that Bodhisattva vow is misconstrued as letting everybody have a peace no matter what. And this is where boundaries come in. Boundaries can be boundaries of disconnection, or they can be boundaries of connection and love. And that's a reframe that I think is very useful to do if you do any journaling at all. Think about your boundaries and think about any boundaries you might need to reset. Think about guilt you've had when you've put in a boundary forward in an old friendship, and ask yourself, is this a boundary of connection, or is it a boundary of disconnection? Is it a boundary that I put in place so I could continue loving this person or being of use to this situation for my own self-care? Or is it a boundary that I've put out of fear and out of anger? And so, for example, me going into death row, I loved putting on the bulletproof, stab-proof vest. And it wasn't because I was afraid. I was never afraid on death row. It was because it was a symbol of protection for me. It was a symbol and a reminder of the energetic protection that I do every day, even here on this little island. And I'll say that I started this practice of energetic protection long before I stepped foot into a prison. I started it with when I was working with middle school kids, because they were so terrible. They were so mean. They were so disinterested and disrespectful. And I found myself beat up every day. And I thought, oh, this has got to change. So what I do for energetic protection, I will just offer you what I do for energetic protection. And I want to invite you to really and truly create your own version out of this. So this is an invitation to be creative, artful, do what works for you. I imagine myself every morning before I get out of bed, as I'm waking up, as I am aware that I'm waking up, I do some prayers right away. I do the bodhicitta prayers, and not suggesting you do that, but you can if you want. It's just a right place to set intention. And then I imagine myself, sometimes I use those two triangles that I led you with, the grounding, the spiritual alignment. But often I use what is like a womb of opalescent energy that surrounds me. And it's grounded with the heavens and all my enlightened Buddha, Dharma, Bodhisattva teachers. And it's grounded with the earth. And it holds me. And it allows me to bring forward all of the blessings and the healing energy of the universe. So it's not about Susan. It's about what I can fill myself with and be present with, so that whoever is in front of me gets that energy in whatever way they need. And this is the wish-fulfilling gem of Buddhism right here. It's not about us being, me being Susan holding this presence. No. It's about doing what you can do over the course of your life. And it might take decades, as it has with me, to get to a point where I feel like I can do this successfully, of really doing your own work around emptying yourself as a vessel. And not having ego attachment, not having agenda, not thinking, oh, well, Ronnie needs this, so I'm going to be this to him. No. It's about just holding that presence and visualizing in this womb my ability to emanate that presence outward to whoever is around me, even if it's the fly trying to get out the window, whoever or whatever is around me. But equally important is this womb filters the negativity of the environment, filters the violence that's in the aura of the people that we serve, filters the all the emotions that we are so susceptible of taking on as our own if we have too porous of boundaries, so that the other person's love and light can also come in and merge with that which I'm embodying. And I bring that forward in a heartbeat if I need to. It's great to start it in the morning. It's even better to have it at your fingertips, the fingertips of your heart mind when you need to. And I'll say that often in the prison, James knows this because I saw him all the time. I was there sometimes 6 days a week, and I was often booked solid for 9 hours, going from group to group to group. And my only time of being alone was walking down the ramp into the yard, and or being up on the upper part of the prison and going to the bathroom. And it was often the time when I would be going to the bathroom between groups where somebody would see me, some inmate would see me and just jet at me. And I would be, my self-care would be lacking because I had to pee so bad my brain was floating. I usually would eat on my way up the ramp, so my blood sugar was just getting stabilized. And that person would want to confess something to me right then in that 3 minutes or something like that. So in this period of time where I would let myself relax, I would often get these images just shot at me of violence, of things that I was not prepared for. And to be able to bring forward those two triangles right then and be grounded in that moment, or snap into place that energetic web, really, really helped me so many times from not taking these things into my body. So I saw so many times, and I'm sure James would probably concur, prison volunteers who came in kind of la-la land with thinking that, oh, great, you know, this is so wonderful. I'm so happy to be doing this, and this is great. And all that is wonderful because it's true. But then they would begin to backbite each other, and they would begin to or have headaches after they left or get sick. And I had one man who said to me after doing a talk on energetic protection to a group of chaplains, he said, you know, I've been going into prisons for 3 years now, and I think this is maybe why every time I go home, I find myself grumpy to my kids or my dog. And another man said, yeah, and I always have a headache after I leave the prison. And, you know, I saw people who were working in restorative justice programs who began to act out in ways that were so anti-restorative justice. Themselves had to counsel these volunteers. The inmates had more emotional literacy than the volunteers did. And to me, it was a sign of not having the energetic protection and discharging the vicarious drama. So we have vicarious trauma. It can easily be discharged by us volunteers into vicarious drama. So this energetic protection piece is huge, you guys. And I'll stop there. I think that's probably a good time to stop on that piece.
You know that I could listen to your teachings all day. Just pull up a cushion and I'm here. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that that's a perfect time to transition into a question and answer period for our audience. So let me see. I've got, I think someone answered. Great. And yeah, okay. So how we can do this is if you are new or if you're a seasoned member, you can jump into the Q&A box. So if you see on your Zoom screen, the bottom black bar, there's 2 boxes and it says Q&A, and you can place your questions for Susan there. And we'll just give it a few minutes for people to collect their thoughts and ask. And while we're waiting, I know that you had mentioned it in this meeting and we had talked about it before. Will you share the story of some visualizations? I know you do some visualizations with Red Tara when you come into the prison. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually, so Chagda Tulku initiated me into the Red Tara practice, but my Lama also coincidentally said, you must only do Tara practice. And his deity was Tara, and the manifestations of Tara for him that he focused on were green Tara and white Tara. And just as a little aside, Tara has, as all the Tibetan deities do, different manifestations. So green Tara is the manifestation of compassion. White Tara is a manifestation of healing, and red Tara is a manifestation of enlightened activity. So for me, given that I'm a Buddhist, but also a lot of my groups were held in the Catholic chapel, I see Mary and Tara as similar, and I worked in a men's prison. So for me, it was more about the divine feminine. So I saw, when I walked into the prison, I saw whatever image of the divine feminine, it was usually Mary or it was Tara, above the prison. And I not holding to lineage particularly. I really hold to the divine feminine, and that's what I tried to embody going into the prison, was the qualities of the divine feminine. Nurturing, caring, warm, accepting, non-judgmental. And I saw that love and that light just surrounding first the entire prison, including all the guards, and also then all the individual men that I was able to be in touch with during the course of the day. And walking through the yard, if you have a prisons where you get to walk to the yard, an amazing opportunity to spread that vision.
I have a participant asking for you to repeat the qualities of the red and green and white taras. Will you say that for our audience again?
Sure. So green tara, compassion, the emanation of compassion. White tara, healing, the emanation of healing. And red tara, divine activity or enlightened activity.
And red tara is the practice that was given to you and
Jarvis, yeah.
Jarvis.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yep.
We have a question from Andy. He asks kind of a pedestrian question, but Susan, are your teachings, coursework, these energetic protections available online? How can people study or learn from you?
I'm so glad you asked that. Well, there's somebody on the in the group here today. She and I have plans to write more about it because there's not much written about it. But for now, I have a piece written in a class that is available on the Chaplaincy Institute. I'm happy to send that out to anybody if you'd like, but there's really not a lot written about this, which is why I really wanted to focus on it today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a whole room of future students. I'm absolutely when it happens. And we have another question. Do you work with incarcerated women?
I am so happy to say that my prison correspondence course is now in women's prisons. When the last 8 months of my death row work were really sad for me because I was going to have to say goodbye to those men, and I knew that they were not going to be served by anybody for a long time, if ever. And so we decided, what would we do what can we do to dedicate all these years? What can we do to pay forward all the good that we have generated amongst our Sangha? And I was hoping they would have the idea of a correspondence course, and they did. I kind of led them to it. But one man said at the time, he says, and let's really focus on women because women are so underserved. So it's really just these last 2 months that I've had a tidal wave of women participating in my course now. In prisons across the United States.
And I love hearing that the men were saying, let's show up for the women.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the first comment. Mm-hmm.
I love the questions rolling in. This is great. Very happy about this. Susan, we had emailed about this, and I think it's a really potent question. Are all beings with sincere intention able to develop the ability for energetic protection, or are there some who should not do this work even if they are called to it?
This work meaning prison work?
I think so.
Oh yeah, I think most people should not do prison work. Yeah, I think it's a rare bunch who can sustain this work. There's a lot of people who go in, and I said this to somebody once who was part of a volunteer retreat that I attended, and I said, well, what's your spiritual practice? You're obviously so infatuated with the men's transformation. What do you do? And he goes, oh, I don't do anything. And that's the kind of voyeuristic approach that I think a lot of volunteers have. So a lot of people can go into prisons and do this work with a voyeuristic approach, but there's not too many of us soldiers who can go into prison work as a reflection of our own spiritual path. And most definitely people with unresolved trauma should not go into prisons for the reasons that I spoke of in the energetic protection piece. You know, as those of us who have done self-help groups in prisons know, unresolved trauma can be hidden for a long, long time and can be something as minimal as losing I'm not saying minimal because I believe this, but something like losing a pet at a very young age and being told, you know, it's just a hamster. What are you crying about? That can be traumatizing. So most of us on the outside do not have the motivation to really look and heal our inner stuff. And I think that it's really important for ongoing prison volunteers to constantly be in touch with themselves about places that might be hidden from them, ways this energetic might be seeping in.
And I think when we show up for our own personal work and, you know, turning our wounds into a place of power continues to remove us from triangulation, from our own victimization, right? So the deeper that we get into our own work, the more that we can show up in true service, not showing up as rescuers or not showing up as helpers. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, just to add that on to doing our own work.
Yeah, there's a great article that I include in all of my chaplaincy classes by Rachel Naomi Remen called, if you just Google Rachel Naomi Remen, Fixing, Helping, Serving, it really speaks to the difference between fixing, helping, and serving. If we can keep ourselves as practitioners in the serving mode, that allows us to be nourished constantly by that spiritual alignment that I've spoken of today. If we get into fixing and helping, it's more of our head, it's more of our ego. You know, like for example, a social worker or a doctor, their job is to fix, their job is to help. For us to go in and work with people in the transformation of heart and spirit is really serving where they are in their life right now. It's more of serving what's present. There's a big difference.
Can you repeat? Oh, great. I was just going to say, so it's Rachel Naomi Remen's In Service of Life. Is that what you were mentioning?
More specifically, the Fixing, Helping, Serving article. So I think that is a part of the title though, James. I think you got it. I can also send it to, it's the same. Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll make that a blog post. That's
good.
We have a question from our audience. How can I know if I'm ready to volunteer in prison?
Pay attention to your body, what your body's telling you. Go in. If you get to the point of going in, if you realize that I think I need to go in with energetic protection. See if you feel fear. If you feel fear, ask yourself, is it related to a trigger? Is it related to conditioning? And as you meet people, notice your judgments. Notice how you protect yourself. None of us, and definitely no inmate, deserves to be identified through the rest of their life by one of the worst moments of their lives. If you can let them have that freedom, then you're probably going to be okay with prison work. But if your own fears and your own judgments continue to show up, and or you find yourself with stomach aches or headaches or all of that, it might be a sign that there's some triggers that you have that you would be wise to resolve before really doing prison work. And, you know, I tell people all the time in my chaplaincy classes, working with kids is working with prisons. Because if you can help kids feel connected, you're stopping the pipeline. So prison work is with all of its excitements, can be equally benefited by working with kids.
Mhm. Thank you for saying that. Question from Doe. My question is, do you work with medicine Buddha teachings or mantras in your prison service?
Yes, absolutely. Medicine Buddha is a mantra that I cut and pasted it onto pages of, like a page with 108 medicine Buddha mantras that I regularly include on the back of one of my newsletters for the men. And in COVID times, oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's important in presenting Dharma to inmates to do it in an interfaith way, to do it in a way where they're not thinking that it's this Buddha that they have to focus on particularly because it's only this Buddha. If you think about the medicine Buddha being an emanation, a lightning rod for all the healing energies of the universe, then it allows more accessibility to the whole idea of medicine Buddha meditation. So just like in our Western world, not many of us are cultural Buddhists. Same in the prison. You have many people who are Muslim or Christian, but they are interested in Buddhism. So it's important that when we do present things like Buddhism or anything that is related, that we allow them inroads. It's really important.
And maybe for any members of our audience that might not be familiar, will you tell us a little bit about the medicine Buddha?
Well, medicine Buddha is a blue Buddha. So Tibetan Buddhism is all about all kinds of symbolism. So if you looked at I could bring you a picture right now, but maybe that's not useful. If you looked at medicine Buddha and then you look at all of the various things that medicine Buddha is holding, the lapis stone, the bowl of medicine, the color blue, it's all very symbolic. And even us going in, if we look at medicine Buddha, we have an image in our mind of medicine Buddha, of the qualities of medicine Buddha. So imagine you're blind and you don't know what medicine Buddha looks like. You're just taking in the qualities, and walk in anywhere, even in the grocery store, stand there and embody medicine Buddha qualities of healing. That is medicine Buddha. And medicine Buddha represents the healing energies of the universe. This is a bit of a belief that Buddhists have, especially Tibetan Buddhism, that the energies of the universe are healing, are love. And from a Buddhist perspective, when we talk about healing of sentient beings, we're talking about, on a very simple level, getting beyond othering. But from the Buddhist perspective, the suffering that is the root of suffering, of the Four Noble Truths, is othering of ourselves. We do a lot of othering of ourselves, and one of them is thinking that we're separate from all other beings, from all other life, that we are independently existing little entities that go through life in our own little bubble. And that is the healing that medicine Buddha is addressing, along with all the other kind of ailments and diseases and things like that. But medicine Buddha is not the only one. The love of Mary, the love of Jesus. So really, I urge you all, and this is me as an almost 50-year practicing Buddhist now, to see the qualities here versus the images. And that's what is going to engage with the imprint, the spiritual imprint of the people that we're around, even if we're driving down the freeway and we emanate, we bring forward the healing. We, even in our mental capacity, the conceptualize what the healing energy of the universe would be, and look and see people driving and imagine that them disconnected from that, or the back to the TV puja. That is doing the work of Medicine Buddha right there.
I love that. It's really walking the path, you know.
Mhm.
It's like, it's our practice isn't just when we're on our cushion.
Yeah.
I know that we had talked also that you wanted to offer a dedication, which I'm so grateful for. But then I also wanted to just give you the floor of anything that we didn't bring up today, or anything that you did hope to share with this community, your community, our community.
I feel complete. I don't know if anybody has any questions of things that they that I didn't, and if we don't have time for more questions, you can certainly include my email to people, and I'm happy to respond individually to people. But for me, I feel complete, and I'm very grateful to have been here today, and I hope that it's been of use to people.
I'm so grateful. I love that we have a whole room of personal heroes, and you are absolutely one of mine. I know that we had Bo Paul on a couple weeks ago, and when I was doing the pre-meeting interview with him, he had spoken about you, and there was an immediate yes for me. I said, I was like, I need to know. We basically just like stopped the car, pulled over the conversation, and I was like, wait, who is that? I need to know her. So thank you also to Bo. I don't know if he's in the room or not, but thank you for the introduction. And I know that our audience is so grateful to have you here today, and really just the perfect way to round out our year of webinars and really building this community. So thank you.
Well, there is one thing that I want to say.
Yeah.
So James Fox, I knew James from living in the same area and then the prison work. And to me, and this, I really want to say this, James, so I hope you blush, but to me, James is the epitome of a dedicated prison worker. In San Quentin, there was a lot of ego around people who led programs or developed programs. And there was a lot of people owning programs that were conglomerates from other programs. And James walked through all of that stuff, standing tall, humble, present for the men, responsible, good boundaries. And I worked with hundreds of men that were taking part of the prison yoga classes. And I don't think that the transformation of the people I saw would have been half as potent and lasting were it not for for yoga, for the ability of the men to actually process some of the trauma through the trauma-informed yoga that you guys do, and that James has done and developed. And James, you're a hero to me. You are kind of an unsung hero, so I want to sing praises. If I think about anybody that I bow to in prison work, it's you. And I just really wanted to say that.
Don't really have words. It's really beautiful to witness this connection. And yeah, I want to offer James, if you're available to connect via video, we can invite James in, and I would love to witness this dialogue a little more. Let's see. Bill, I think I'm going to promote to panelists. Is that what I should do? You let me know, and we can invite James in. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'm wiping away the tears. And the feeling is so mutual, Susan. I always felt you as a kindred spirit. Also someone with great humility and so dedicated to doing the work. And just an unspoken understanding between us. So I really appreciate the acknowledgement, and I want to send it back to you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to be in touch with you soon.
Oh, good.
It's been way too long.
I know. I'm so glad to hear that. I've had numerous conversations with you as my prison ministry project has ballooned. I was like, oh, I got to talk to James. I don't know what I've created here.
Happy to help however I can.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I'm so glad to be able to connect with you in this way and to say those things to you, because I've held them for so many years, and it's really beautiful to be able to say them out loud amongst all the people that are here.
Thank you so much. And it came at the perfect time as well.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
Namaste, namaste.
Namaste. So great.
Susan, yeah, will you lead us in a dedication?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's remember how it was to create that posture that we started with, just the physical posture of alignment. And as you remember, allow every cell in your body to remember the feeling of being held and embraced in spiritual alignment. And remember the visual of the diamond in our heart, shining outward, connecting with everyone in this webinar today. Remember the swelling, the feeling intention, multiplication of that intention as we join with everyone else on this webinar. And imagine that as a light, as an energy, as a force. And bring in now your remembrances of all the other people who have shown up to lead you in these webinars, their intention. As many as you can remember, bring them forward into this diamond of our heart space. And now, imagine everyone that you have ever worked with, been with, in relationship with, and healing relationship with, inmates, family, people, friends, not friends. Imagine them coming forward, including those of all the people who have shown up in this webinar, and all the people who have taught or spoken in this webinar. And imagine this sea of beings as our community, as our connections merge. And think about James going out into the world, around the world, I don't know how many times, visiting prisons, starting programs. Think about the thousands of inmates who benefited by the Prison Yoga Program project, and their families, because as we know, When one changes their vibration, so too do the people around us. We have this staggering number of faces in this diamond of our hearts that really, if we think about it, it continues to fractal out, to increase. As we hold this image, this boundless, endless, limitless sea of beings and all the sentient beings that are around them, the birds, the dogs, the trees, the cats, the squirrels, the deer, our climate, our earth. Let's imagine all the positive thought generated by everyone there in this diamond of our heart, extending out and joining with the river of wholeness that's driving our souls towards oneness, towards interconnection. Bring forward too all the imperfection of all the beings, the knowledge of all the imperfection, that we're all born imperfect and we're all going to die imperfect. And let's generate together compassion and patience for ourselves and all our imperfections, as well as all beings in the diamond of our heart. Patience that goes beyond the bookends of a lifetime. And trust. We're all where we need to be on this path. And finally, love. A love that, yes, it's generated from our heart, but it's a love that we open into. This stage of ripening, we're opening into this love that exists beyond us. And imagine that diamond of our heart just bursting with the sea of beings, with this love, with this patience, with this compassion, with this trust, bursting until outlines of this diamond disintegrate, and that's all there is. And this is the nature of our being. This is the nature of all beings. This is what we serve. That which is beyond name and form. Now we'll bring it back a little bit more focused into the Prison Yoga Project, knowing the infinite possibilities as we all expand into our own true nature. So thank you all. Before we end, let me go back and bring forward most definitely the victims of all the people that we have worked with and that we will work with, and bring them forward into this picture too, intentionally. This is really important. Sending them that trust, that patience, that compassion, that love. Beyond the bookends of lifetimes, may they be healed. And now, allowing that light and all that energy to permeate our own bodies, to fully empower the Prison Yoga Project to go forward into the new year, concluding this year. I will ring some Ting Sha. And as I do, can imagine that light and that love and that trust and that compassion and that patience encircling our entire planet. So with a deep inhale and exhale. May all beings benefit by what we've done today. Thank you, everybody.